much, but I am gonna. There we go. And alrighty, here's what I'm gonna do. Okay, I am going to, let's see, we've got a couple of folks. Alrighty, I'm gonna unmute you guys and allow you to mute yourself, if that makes sense. So you all are unmuted and you can mute yourself, and then that way you can unmute yourself as well if you want to. Perfect, looks like everybody has the ability, and then you can keep your video going, you can turn it off if you want to, whatever works. I'm on for, like, you know, encouragement, visual encouragement. So I am gonna go ahead and get us started. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to chat to me on the Zoom room chat. Alrighty, so here we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Sarah Snow. Thank you so much for joining us. I am the Congregational Care Minister at Abiding Presence and Lutheran Church. And part of my job here is to lead our mental health team. And our goal is to lessen the stigma of mental illness, and to provide support and free resources to our community to foster good mental health. And while the church is sponsoring this event, it is not a religious presentation, so I want you guys to know that you are all welcome, no matter what your religious, political, or whatever beliefs are. Oh, the sun is shining, yay. I've been in conversation with Megan and Allie about doing seminars around topics relating to parents in Northern Virginia, and we had lots of ideas, and then this virus thing happened, and it gave us a lot more to talk about and think about. So mental wellness is even more important now as it ever was. So we are doing this session. This is our second session of Parenting in Northern Virginia, sort of coronavirus edition. And we will probably have another session, or maybe two, maybe look for one in May, maybe, and one in June, maybe. We'll see, just depending on the needs and kind of just what people need and want. So right now, because there's a smaller group of us, I have it to where you are able to unmute yourselves and ask questions. So please feel free to do that in the presentation. And if you have any questions that you would rather just type to me and I can say it, that's fine too. You know, if you want to do it anonymously, that's fine. We can do it however you want to do it. So we'll just roll with it, play it by ear. So I will now introduce Megan and Allie. Some of you probably have already met them. They are school psychologists, both of them, who practice locally with the counseling and assessment practice of Fairfax. They are also moms, so they are in this together with us. All right, Megan and Allie, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're happy to be here. Yeah, we can definitely tell it's a smaller group, but this is something that we are recording for others to enjoy at other times. You know, there's schedules don't really exist anymore, so it's hard to make a plan and, you know, follow through with that. So I'm anticipating that we have others that, you know, would like to gather some of this information. So we are recording that. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because, you know, we're speaking, you know, broadly with kids from a variety of ages that, you know, may or may not be the exact ages of the kids of the people in this group. I am, like Sarah said, I'm a licensed school psychologist. I worked in the public schools for many years, and now I work at George Mason in their cognitive assessment program, which is now on pause because of all of this, and doing counseling and a lot of assessment through the counseling and assessment practice of Fairfax. So, and I have two kids that are school age, for first grade and fourth grade. So I'm kind of right along with everybody trying to figure this all out and how to keep everybody safe and happy enough, and trying to learn a little bit. So Go ahead, Allie.
And yeah, I'm Allie Ferris. I am originally from the Midwest and have lived out in Northern Virginia now for 7 years, 6 years. I don't even know, I've lost track. But I have served the school population from preschool through high school. Most recently, I worked in just a local elementary school for the past 5 years. And then I'm currently serving now just kind of at a part-time through the private practice as well with Megan. So just supporting kids and families, helping them overcome obstacles to their learning or social emotional challenges that they may have. We do assessments there to help determine if there is an underlying disability. We also do some individual therapy and parent consultation as well. So those are some things that our practice offers. We are working with transitioning into telehealth, as a lot of practices are currently doing as well. So just wanted to mention that.
Okay. Do you, so I guess we've already kind of gone through the Zoom, oops, wait, hold on. Oh, there it is. The Zoom logistics. Yeah. Allie found this funny thing, which I think is silly. Yeah, so stay as long as you're able to, you know, don't worry if there's other things going on, just, you know, take in what you can and leave the rest. Yeah, and Sarah mentioned you can chat to her and she will share some comments. We did want to kind of just take a moment and like, you know, maybe share a little bit if anybody's comfortable with that, just sharing how you're doing and how kind of all of this is. I noticed some familiar faces from our last session, which was, I think, what, 2 weeks ago? And, you know, a lot has changed. So does anybody want to kind of chime in? If you want to, you can unmute yourself and share or comment to Sarah. And just like what's been maybe the hardest part about this, or what's been stressful, especially just personally or related to working with your children.
Hi, this is Lori. I think the hardest thing for me is I have a 9-year-old son, 3rd grader, who just peeked on board. I don't know if you saw his sneak peek in front of the camera, but you know, I'm home all day with him. I'm a nurse practitioner, but not going right now, so I have certainly some provider guilt, but being a mom comes first right now because my husband works full time. And I think what's hitting me the hardest this week is leaving everybody behind and going to the grocery store and having a mask on, which in my work setting never felt suffocating, but in the grocery store makes me feel claustrophobic a little bit. Certainly don't like wearing it and all the millions of precautions, and then coming home and telling my son, no, I did get you a treat, but you can't touch it yet. And it's just, you know, a world where you want to protect him from the scary reality, but you got to engage him at this age too. So that's just kind of my thoughts. Busy weeks because I still work, I teach too, and we fill our days.
Yeah, the grocery store thing, 100% is really where that really shook me. I went this morning and I hadn't been at least in a week, and I just feel like things have changed so much, and maybe the safety level hasn't, or I mean, well, I guess it has, but the precautions of the mask, that just made it feel so real. And just kind of we're in a new chapter of this. It hit me too. So I'm definitely with you on that.
Got a couple of comments coming in. One said, thank you. My 12-year-old and I are doing well, but having trouble communicating effectively with the stress. And then another said, my son is 7 years old with high anxiety and sensory issues. Between his stuff and our own stuff, the house is not a very enjoyable place to be, and yet we don't have a choice.
Yeah. Hopefully we can touch upon some of those topics here today. Thank you so much for sharing. I'll share. I feel like I'm doing okay. My husband's here working full time. We have a toddler and a very small home. So high energy little boy in a small space has been a challenge. So I've definitely had to get creative. So I would say that my initial kind of like let the emotions flow was as all of, in the past 2 weeks, more and more restrictions were rolling out. When they closed the parks and when they closed access to, because we kind of had a secret soccer field in a spot where we had space and he could just kind of like run and be a little boy. And so when that happened, that's where I just kind of felt such heaviness and just had to let it out. But yeah, the grocery store is significant too. Very stressful times.
It is. So just to lighten this up a little bit, for those, many people experience anxiety on the regular period of time. Well, some level of anxiety is normal, but the levels, some have various levels of that. And I just thought this was funny. How useless my anxiety is, how can you think of all the scenarios of all the things that will harm us? And this one never came up, did it? So that's, especially if you have underlying anxiety, you or your children or anybody in your family, that does really heighten things and makes this difficult. So today we plan to talk about, just emotions kind of in general, and with the overlay of, what we're dealing with now. I don't think any of these kind of presentations can meet every single situation or need, but kind of it's broad, and the idea of, just taking some time to think about what are some ways that we process our emotions and what are some ways that we can help our kids process those emotions. And knowing that, and the reason we asked about how everybody's doing is, one, to, show that connection. And then also two, we all know if mom's not doing well, the rest of the family might be struggling too. So we have to take care of ourselves. Sorry, this is in my way. So this tip here, I'll just kind of read that out, but this came from Fairfax County Public Schools, the school psychology department that Allie and I used to work in. If you're on Twitter, and they might be doing it on Facebook too, I'm not sure, but I did see this they posted this, this quote, and they put a new tip out every day. And so it's easy to digest, just in one tip at a time. So if you are on Twitter, or you can find them, so it'll be FCPS School Psych Services or Psychological Services, and find them and follow them. You might be able to get a tip of the day. And it's just, I feel like one little thing at a time is easy to digest. So this comes from the article that the discomfort you're feeling is grief. And it's just relevant that they posted this, and because Sarah had, didn't need to do that yet. Sarah had sent this to Allie and I, and we were chatting about it a bit. But anyway, so they'll giving your kids and ourselves time and space to grieve. The loss of normalcy, events canceled, the loss of connection, this is hitting us, and we're grieving collectively. We're not used to this kind of collective grief in the air. Allow your children to feel sadness and fear and anger. They've experienced losses. Loss of time with friends, participation in activities and sports, and maybe even graduation. If we can help our children to allow the feelings to happen, they'll happen in an orderly way, and it will empower them. They will be in control. They will not be victims. So that is the article, and we have this at the end of our presentation, and you can Google it and look for it. It really is a pretty powerful, and helps to kind of just process like those icky feelings and that we're feeling, that our kids are feeling, and that's coming and going, and some are showing it more readily than others. But that one way to kind of think of that is grief, and that and it's also, one term they used was anticipatory grief, and that has to do with like your mind going to the future and imagining the worst, and so really what we want to do is come into the present, and so we'll talk about that a little bit. But when you think about also the levels of grief and how we respond to that, all the different kind of steps. And so when you think about it, like denial, and these always don't happen sequentially, and we kind of loop back and forth. It's not always a linear path, but early on we might have been saying like, oh, this won't really affect us. And then that frustration when things started closing down, it's like, oh my gosh, we can't do this. It's ridiculous. Why are you making me stay home? I'm missing my activities. I'm feeling really angry and frustrated about that. And then kind of bargaining and figuring out, okay, well, if I do this, then maybe I can still do that. You know, if I social distance for a couple of weeks or even a week, then things will be better. And then I can, you know, get back to my life. And then feeling like sadness about it. And like Ali mentioned with the parks, and for me and many of my friends and others I connect with and other parents of school age kids, is this sadness about the school year was really, really tough. And, you know, and then eventually you know, the goal or kind of the process would be getting to that level of acceptance. And acceptance does not mean that you like it. But it's, you know, what can you have control over, and what, you know, I can maintain a safe distance. I can wear the mask even if I don't want to. I can, you know, not see my parents or grandparents and for a period of time, and, you know, learn to work and play differently. So with kids, you know, they don't have all that language. And when they don't feel right, you know, they may not behave right. And so that's really looking for their behavior is really the first indicator, is what's changing. Of course, we would expect things to be different, but, you know, those, and we'll kind of talk about when to know, when to look maybe for more individualized support, but thinking about what that unexpected behavior might be communicating. And so we'll kind of continue to talk about that. There's just some things that all, you know, in our training, what we really talk a lot about is behavior is communication. So if behavior, you know, what is that behavior telling us? I think I'm going to pass on to Ali.
So this next slide is wordy. I apologize for all of the words on the screen, but the message really resonated with me, which is that working, parenting, and teaching are 3 different jobs that basically cannot be done at the same time. I mean, so basically when you feel like you're so extremely stressed, it's not because you're doing this wrong, it's because it's too much to do at one time. So I know last time, if you were able to join us, we really stressed kind of giving yourself grace. And this kind of piggybacks on that, that as much as you can, if you are feeling stress, wherever you can, to kind of lower your expectations of yourself just a little bit, if at all possible, in different areas. To allow that to happen, this really emphasizes choosing connection and maybe more pleasant experiences, if at all possible, with your kids over, you know, I know we're going to be rolling out, or Fairfax and different counties are rolling out more of the virtual learning soon. So I'm sure there's going to be arguments and additional challenges that will come, but as much as we can choose, you know, silliness and playfulness and all of those things, over arguing, the better off everyone will be. It's not always possible, but hopefully we can lay out some tips and strategies that will make things a little bit lighter in your homes in this really heavy time. We tried to include some different media in this presentation so that you're not just listening to us speak this entire time. So I just have a little clip here. I don't know if you guys have heard of Janet Lansbury. She is an author and she does consultation primarily with early childhood, so with different educators and parents. She has a podcast called Unruffled, and she just has a lot of the leading childhood development experts and different psychologists who have written really well-known books on her podcast to interview. And so this is just a little clip that I wanted to play that she did recently with an early childhood person who emphasizes on the importance of play for children. Her name is Lisa Griffin Murphy, and I will play that now. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it loud and clear.
Get into how we can help.
Here.
Parents are having a lot of difficulty right now. They've got kids at home. They want them to learn and stay on track. They also want them to be able to be independent and self-directed in their play and work. For the younger children, it's obviously just going to be play. Parents are giving me feedback like, well, yes, you talk about self-directed play, you talk about independent play, but my child can't do that, or my child won't do that because they are an only child and they're clingy with me, or they need me, or they have ADHD, or they just can't do that. They always want me to play with them. I would love to find some ways to help parents help their children get over this hump.
Mm-hmm. I think the answer to that is going to be so very specific and unique to whoever's ears are listening to what we say. So I'm giving everybody permission to kind of dial it down a little bit. You know, you don't need to be recreating school right now in your homes for your young children. And I think sometimes just granting permission to take a big breath helps eliminate some of the stress of, you know, what folks are feeling. That's at least what I'm telling everybody. And as much as everybody wants to be, you know, let's create a schedule and let's do some activity planning, and, you know, that's awesome. And I'm going to say, you know, right now, let's be mindful of where actually we are in the situation and in the circumstances, if that makes sense. You know, you don't need to put on your teacher hat and turn your home into a childcare center or a preschool or an elementary school. I think children are able to play by themselves. I think that families in general have maybe become accustomed to entertaining each other a little bit more. And I don't say that with any judgment or finger pointing. But I think often we're not comfortable sitting in the time that it might take for children to get an idea for themselves to move on. And so as adults, because we get kind of panicky and rushed, we will project our stuff onto the kids. And the kids, of course, are going to pick up on that. So we're like, come on, just pick something, go do something, go do something. Whereas if maybe we just turned around, we know they're safe, right? They're in the house, they're in their bedroom or whatever, in the living room, the basement. They're probably, for the most part, not in an environment where we need to be overly worried about their physical safety. Let them be bored for a little bit. That's okay.
Absolutely. Oh, you bring up so many important points. First,
Okay, so the clip was small, so I would recommend, though, the podcast. It is really, if you're into podcasts. The rest of that episode is really, really good. They do give a lot of more specific tips on if your child is similar to the description of the child that was presented. I know this was helpful and resonated with me. Obviously, we're used to our children being in activities all day long or shifting from one task to another, whether that be in school or a preschool setting, or even I stay home with my son during the day. I work in the evenings. And so he's used to all of his outings and activities. And so when the professionals and everybody speaks and says, allow your children to be bored, you don't have to be the one juggling and entertaining them all day long. It kind of gives you a little bit of permission. You can kind of grant some permission to yourself to, your child is safe. Let them be bored, let them whine, let them work through it, let them find something, and then they'll play. And from boredom come some really great things. So I just wanted to share that little clip. I don't know if Megan, you had something to share from that as well.
I think I did, but I don't remember what it was.
That's okay.
Full disclosure. But I mean, yes, I mean, that idea of getting through the uncomfortable part, and that whether this is because there is a lot more time, like you're just saying. I mean, there's so much more time, and as I'm looking out the window right now, I can see, my daughter is playing dolls by herself, and honestly, it's only because she didn't do that before, and she really only played with friends or with us, and she just doesn't have access. We can't play with her all of the time, or do I want to play dolls? And the idea of just kind of letting, but it's kind of sticking through that whining, and like, there's nothing to do, I'm so upset, I just want to, all of those uncomfortable feelings, and then getting on the other side of that to figure out, because as we know, and the reason why we're mentioning this with play is because play is how kids work through things and develop creativity and self-driven, and all of those things. There's so much that benefits from it, and there is a lot of desire right now to kind of go to screens, which are fine. I mean, especially now, I'm sure all of our kids are on more screens, and it's not a judgment thing. And but there is a point we probably do want to turn them off, and kind of just letting that ride. So Do you want
Okay,
to-
so this is just kind of, we're going to be talking about when kids are expressing really big emotions. I promise. I know we've been talking for already 25 minutes, so we'll get to the main content. But just to keep in mind, are your bases kind of covered? I know with my son, he can go from perfectly fine to hangry in no time flat. So just, if your child is losing it, making sure all of your basic, are they hungry, tired, are they not feeling well? I think this is something just good to keep in mind, is the space that your children are in, is it generally a yes space? When I'm thinking more of early childhood, are your kids in a space where you're constantly having to tell them, don't climb on that, don't touch that, don't do this? So just making sure, the clip I just played said you don't have to turn your room into a childhood development center, but just making sure, like, maybe it's time we put away this dish I don't want to be broken, or this thing that I don't want them to climb on. Making sure it's just that yes space. Predictability, just we'll talk a little bit more about that. But daily check-ins, a lot of what we're talking about is more of that externalized expression of an emotion, a meltdown or really visibly upset, but our kids can also turn things inward and become more anxious or quiet or sad. And so just making sure that we're checking in, especially our elementary age kids, checking in, or middle or high school, on a daily or regular basis, and just kind of getting a feel for how they're doing, giving them an opportunity to share. The last point was intervening early before we get too irritated. So sometimes our kids start doing things that are bothering us. So before it gets to a point where we lose it and snap, if we know it's probably going to go down that road, then intervening early and shifting their attention to a different task if what they're doing is not something that we're okay with. And then just the developmentally appropriateness of the tasks that we're asking our children to partake in, how much time we're expecting them to play independently, and if it's developmentally appropriate. I mean, if they are used to constant shifts and stimulation, then it's probably not going to be in their wheelhouse to entertain themselves for an hour at a time. So start slow, start with more familiar tasks, and then kind of build up to it. And then similarly, I know Megan had something to share with just the tasks that we're asking.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, like, especially as we're getting into all the schoolwork and what we're trying to get them to do, and trying to avoid power struggles related to that. Teachers, the classroom is already in school is already built to have, regular shifts in the activities. There's a lot of moving from this hands-on activity to this independent task to this group task. And what they're going to be doing is so different than that. And really thinking about attention spans, and the general rule of thumb, I mean, it's certainly going to vary, but it's about 2 to 5 minutes per age level. So if your child is 5, 5 times 2 is 10 minutes to max 25 minutes, but doing one activity, that's a lot. I mean, yeah, so that's doing any one activity for a directed period of time. So kind of in that range, and thinking, especially with all this new kind of thinking on the lower end of it. So that means for a 10-year-old, that still means 20 minutes of directed focus on one thing at a time, kind of at them, most, I would say, at this point. So just really putting things into small chunks and shifting the activities when we are the ones kind of leading the instruction.
A question that came in was, what might an ideal daily check-in look like?
Well, it depends on the age. We can maybe give some examples if that person wants to share the age range of their child or children they're talking about. Okay. So yeah, so like in that school age range, 7, 8, 9 years old. I think it depends on when your kid is ready to talk. I think for some families, I hear this a lot with clients or friends, is that bedtime, just really kind of checking in and asking, and maybe developing a routine, especially in this new time of, like, what went well, what did you like, what didn't you like, just some sort of prompts that kind of gets into that routine of, what felt good, what didn't feel good. I mean, that can go well past all of this. just to kind of start that communication to notice. And then if there were kind of big emotions or a meltdown or some other kind of reaction, whether that was internalizing or externalizing kind of things, like during that time where it's not in the midst of the big emotion, that's not a time to process and talk. Less words then. But then it's like, oh, and it seemed like you got really upset or you had a hard time when blah, blah, blah happened. You know, what was going on there. So kind of processing through that. So it's kind of responding to something and then just kind of a broad, I think, just asking those questions. It can also be in the form of writing or drawing, or if your child is not especially verbal. I mean, because a lot of times you are gonna, and you in the beginning you might just get a 1 or 2 word response, but continue establishing that routine, or maybe during dinner time, everybody shares is another time. Now that we actually have time for family dinners, right? We're not running off to activities.
And that could be a simple, like, your pit and your peak of your day. So that's something that we would do in the school system a lot, just to kind of check in with kids, is what was your pit, your low point, what was your peak, your high point, and what's something you're grateful for from today. So gratitude can help in a lot of situations, but giving kids an opportunity to kind of share, or their petal or their thorn, like what was something that was positive and what was something that they felt negative about, or, you know, if you could change something from today or for tomorrow, what would it be? So kind of just having more kind of those scripted questions that you do on a routinely basis. So even throughout the day, they might be kind of thinking about it.
And if they don't respond the first time or get like a lot of depth, I wouldn't drop it. I would try to keep it going.
Yeah. I mean, my child barely knows words, but every dinner I ask him what he's grateful for. He always says dada, but I ask him always. Okay, so really the point when your kid is kind of expressing some big emotion, so let's say a very basic, they want the green cup is in the dishwasher, or, you know, traject that to something situation specific. They want to play outside with their friends and they can't. If there's a situation, they're upset and the emotions are starting to flow. They're stomping, they're crying, they're tantruming, whatever it is that's kind of, they're expressing their emotion. So the very first thing that we want to try our best to do is to have there be a pause between our child's expression of big emotion and our response to our child. So that is really always going to be step one for when our child is expressing emotions, taking a pause. So we have a little video here that we're going to show, and then there's just a little bit, some things that I'll kind of walk through of what you might do during your pause.
Oops.
You may have heard this word mindfulness. It's become something of a buzz phrase of late. I'm going to give you one simple, serviceable definition, which is this. Mindfulness is the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Imagine how useful this could be. Just as an example, driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic. How do you normally react? I think most of us, we normally react by having a thought, which is, I'm pissed. And then what happens next? You immediately, habitually, reflexively inhabit that thought. You actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and your reaction. With just a little bit of mindfulness, in that same situation, you might notice my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting angry. But you don't necessarily have to act on it and chase that person down the road, screaming at them with your kids in the back of the car thinking you've gone nuts. Now, you might be thinking, don't I need to get angry sometimes? Aren't I justified? I would say yes, but probably not as much as you think. The proposition here is not that you should be rendered by mindfulness into some lifeless, non-judgmental blob. The proposition is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things that happen to you rather than just reacting blindly. And that, my friends, is a superpower. How do you get it? The way to get it is through meditation. I believe that meditation and mindfulness are the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told somebody you were going running, they would have said, who's chasing you? But then what happened next? The scientists swooped in. They showed that physical exercise is really good for you. And now all of us do it. And if we don't, we feel guilty about it. And that's where I think we're headed with mindfulness and meditation. It's going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like brushing your teeth, eating well, and taking the meds your doctor prescribed for you. Let me just close by saying, mindfulness is not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to render your life a nonstop parade of unicorns and rainbows. Nonetheless, this is a superpower, and one that is accessible by you immediately.
Okay, so that speaks to mindness and meditation. I'm not sure if that's in anybody's.
I just want to, can I chime in on that for a second?
Yeah.
So that video is, you might recognize the voice as Dan Harris. He's a newscaster on Good Morning America, and he had the whole story behind him. If you're familiar or not, he had a panic attack on live TV several years ago, and was like, oh my gosh, obviously that was really impactful for him. And so he started exploring this idea of mindfulness. But what I like about it is that he goes into it with like a skeptic's eye, and it makes it, I don't know, seem more accessible than people who are spending, weeks in India practicing yoga and meditation. It's more about everyday kind of things. And so there's a book called, he has a book, a podcast, he's got, other audio and videos like this. 10% Happier is one of his things. So we're not going to go into a whole lesson on mindfulness or anything on today, but if you're interested in exploring that, I would say he's a really great starting point for that. So I'll let you go on.
Thank you. That gives good context. So just really taking a pause. So when your maybe child is really upset and you want to respond in a thoughtful way. So some strategies that we talk about in therapy or that we help kids with and adults with is just take 3 seconds, check in with yourself, connect with yourself, figure out what is it that I need in this moment. Sometimes it might be taking just 3 steps in a different direction, doing something to kind of shift physically your body away or move away, or take a huge deep breath, or walk to the cabinet and get a chocolate, like whatever it needs to be for you to kind of take a moment to yourself and take a pause so that you have a thoughtful response instead of just a reaction. These are some different other strategies. So find your feet. So it's just kind of like wiggle your toes. So it's just bringing yourself into the present moment instead of getting swept up into the situation. So bringing calm into the situation. So feeling, your feet in your shoes, wiggling your toes. You can even articulate it. Like, I'm feeling a little frustrated right now. Like, mom needs to feel her toes in her shoes or wiggle her toes. And like, you can even articulate it. And that's kind of modeling to your kids too for the future when they're feeling upset. You're modeling some strategies that you're going to take a pause in a moment before you just respond. Flex and relax. So sometimes when I feel stressed, I feel it like in my shoulders where I just get really tense. And so just even tensing up your shoulders that much more and then relaxing them, or tensing up your fists and then relaxing them. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is a grounding exercise for your senses. So when you're starting to kind of get emotionally overwhelmed, think of your 5 senses and then 5 things that you see in the room and name them. I'm in the laundry room right now, so a freezer, lamp, washer and dryer. So you're kind of physically grounding yourself to where you are. What are 4 things that I hear? What are 3 things that I smell? What are 2 things that I touch? And so on. Practicing love and kindness to yourself. So if you're in a situation and I reference, there's a lot of different books and things that we're going to talk about, but like if you're in a moment where, like I'm trying to put my child in the car seat and they're full-fledged planking, and you're in this moment where you're like, like try and just be what you would be to your friend in that moment. So, for your friend, you might be like, you've got this, like, you're a great mom, you're a great parent, you've got this. So kind of say to yourself what you would say to a friend in those moments, like, you've got this. And then accepting kids' brains for where they are developmentally. We'll talk a little bit more about just different developmental expectations for when we should expect kids. Oftentimes parents for the more of the toddler range expect by around age 2, they should be able to more manage their emotions, when really those skills don't even begin to develop until around 3.5 or 4. And then reflect after the fact. So, you know, maybe the room that was set up wasn't really a yes space, and my child was triggered because I told them 8 times in a row, don't touch that, or that. So just kind of think after the fact, like, what did this situation, like, what could happen differently in the future? And maybe it's nothing, because kids just have to have meltdowns sometimes, and that's called being a human. So yeah, this next piece is Megan. Turn it over to Megan.
So as we're kind of going through this, what I'm noticing is like some of the big aspects of this. When you're talking about kids' emotions, it almost always has to do with changing the adults in their worlds, what they do ahead of time or what they do afterwards. We call those antecedents or consequences. Consequences meaning anything that happens after a behavior. And, you know, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, working with children in a therapeutic situation, we often will only do that or really encourage the parents to be the ones involved, because that's really where the change happens. So I'm just kind of really noticing that we are talking a lot about what parents can do differently. So, you know, acknowledging emotions is kind of one of the big sections that we wanted to speak about next. And I just wanted to kind of check where we are on time. So we're at like 1:15, so we probably should move through. So this is really just about accepting positive feelings. You know, it's easier for us to accept the positive feelings than we are to accept the negative feelings. And the idea is not try to talk people out of their feelings, because that usually doesn't de-escalate. And so yeah, I mean, Allie's in this slide we're using the example of having what we're having for dinner. So, you know, positive, obviously, I'm excited about dinner. This is great. I feel good. Negative feelings, you know, I hate my brother. And then, so it's like trying to talk your child out of that. No, you don't, you love him. You know, we don't say hate in this house. You know, or related to this situation, I want to go to school. This is the absolute worst. It could be so much worse. We have so much food, water, shelter. We get to spend time together. So kind of talking them out of that feeling, it's not going to get you as far, but we can kind of talk about that. So we gave some examples of like what this would feel like for an adult, because I think sometimes the way we talk to our own selves, or we talk to our spouse, or we talk to our coworkers is different than we might talk to our kids. So the example of, you know, in this situation, I have a headache and I slept horribly and I don't want to go to this millionth Zoom meeting. So the friend or the spouse, if they had said these things to us, like, how would we react? Stop complaining. It can't be that bad. You love your job. Or maybe you should have gone to bed earlier. Focusing on the negative isn't productive. Well, I slept poorly too, but I don't complain about my meetings. What time did you go to bed? Did you turn your screens off an hour before? Are you drinking enough water? How much wine did you have? So all of those things, like, that doesn't feel good for us to hear it. And so that sometimes I think our kids, even though our intention is to kind of shift their thinking, people really just often want to be heard. You know, so these are just kind of some of those similar examples. You know, denying of the feelings, but you love spaghetti. It's your favorite thing to eat. You know, listen, sometimes you need to learn that life isn't always fair. You can't always get what you want. You know, look at how well your brother's doing. He's eating his spaghetti. I mean, there's nothing that escalates kids more than this kind of thing. You know, asking questions about it or lecturing. You know, these are things that aren't especially effective for kids in terms of de-escalating those situations. So ultimately, you know, kind of breeze through that a little bit, but ultimately we're not saying that we're expecting people to agree with their kids' negative reactions, or that they can say anything they want or do whatever they want in the situation. but being heard and being validated is really where people, where there's that empathy and connection, and that can de-escalate it. And then that's where problem solving can happen. So we have a cute video from Inside Out. And now that we are all watching a lot of movies with our families, and I know many people have Disney Plus, might be a good one to watch together.
My rocket! Wait, Riley and I were still using that rocket. It still has some salt power left. Who's your friend who likes to play? No! No, you can't keep my rocket to the top. And I go to the moon. Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all I had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time. We had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness.
It sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
Yeah, as Ellie found that, I thought that was really cute. So, you know, the idea is, I mean, if you're not familiar with this movie, is joy. It's all about Inside Out, all about their different feelings. Each character exhibits 100% whatever that one feeling is. So joy, you know, is trying to talk him out of all of his feelings, and sadness is just acknowledging where he is and being there with those feelings with him. And you can just see how that got him through that, rather than trying to distract him or talk him out of it.
Okay. So some tips the biggest bolded thing that you can see here is the word acknowledge for these tips is the main thing that we'll be talking about. You can go to the next one though. Go through this. Okay, so I think initially oftentimes we think, because it is our instinct, is when our children are upset is to tell them like, oh, you're fine, like everything's fine. Like if, you know, my toddler is frustrated or upset, or he fell down and, you know, he's crying, like that kind of instinct of like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And I think oftentimes we have this feeling or fear, whether unconsciously or otherwise, that like if we acknowledge it, like won't it make it worse, or won't it make it kind of linger longer, where if now we're talking about it, you're frustrated, you're this, you're that, you're sad, like are we gonna just make them dwell in this negative state for a longer amount of time? But more often than not, the case is that that's not what happens. They kind of work through it, and then they get through the other side of it before otherwise feeling kind of resistance, where they kind of have to continue to tell you like, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, and you're not acknowledging it. You're telling me I'm fine, but that's not in line with what I'm feeling in this moment. So kind of flipping it on its other end and acknowledging what it is that you see, versus communicating to them the opposite. And then to keep in mind, it's not the same of accepting a behavior, agreeing with it. So if I'm cooking dinner and my son wants to be held, you know, it's acknowledging like, you're frustrated, you're upset, you want me to hold you right now and I'm cooking. Like that's tough. But that doesn't mean I then scoop him up and hold him while I'm frying food on the stovetop. It's just kind of like acknowledging like, yeah, he's frustrated. And then lately he's gone, yeah. He'll just kind of like respond to me that, yeah, you got it. I want you to hold me. So it's just something to kind of like, you're not doing what it is that they want, but you're acknowledging the feeling that's there. And then on to the next one. Okay, and then it's human nature, of course, for us. We don't want our kids to have these huge negative emotions, sometimes for their sake, sometimes for ours. But just my own mantra, and with working with clients too, is that good feelings can't really come in until the bad feelings are let out. So if you think of a metaphor of a sponge that's just so overly saturated, it just can't handle another drop. Sometimes the ringing of the sponge is a meltdown. Sometimes it's crying because the parks are closed or whatever needs to happen. It's that expression of emotion, where then after the emotion has been expressed, the sponge is now able to absorb more of what's going on in the day. So it's just letting that process happen. And as parents, that means really just kind of giving our children complete trust in their ability to kind of work through things. So sitting with them and kind of a calm, like, yeah, you're upset, this is difficult, and acknowledging their feelings, and then watching them kind of work through it and get through the other side of it. It's really powerful to kind of watch that process play out.
Yeah, I was working with a client whose son is not able, as many kids are now, not able to, play. Like one of their neighbors are allowed to play to some degree with other children, and he and his friends are not able to do that. And even with separation, and obviously that feels really bad. And so we talked about different ways to handle it. She had been trying to rationalize and explain, and when he was feeling sad about it or feeling frustrated about it, and so she tried just sitting with him and being like, yeah, this really stinks, like this doesn't feel fair, it doesn't feel right, and it hurts. And he was like, mm-hmm. And this was a school age child, and was able to kind of like acknowledge that, and then it moved, he let that emotion go. He didn't have to share it. He didn't have to have it all by himself. It was shared together. And then he was able to kind of generate some other ideas of what they can do, even though there's other things they cannot do. So that's just another example.
Another mantra is they have to go through it. So we're going on a bear hunt. We can't go over it or under it. We just have to go through this emotion. So our kids are depending on us to name feelings and to validate feelings so that they can become grown-ups that acknowledge feelings, and that, from Megan's example, they don't turn into the grown-ups that are dismissive of how other people feel, because we know that we don't like that when it's done to us. So just modeling validating feelings to our children. And this quote is just, everything is dependent upon our ability to sit with discomfort and not numb it and not reject it and not use it to hurt other people. And everything beautiful comes from there. So it's really just kind of sitting with our kids when they're like upset and sad, and just letting it be, and not trying to rationalize it or change it in that moment. And then, so what might this sound like? Often a simple acknowledgement, as we've been talking about, can really just be enough to diffuse a meltdown or to make it go much shorter than what it maybe otherwise would have been. So that would just look like taking a pause, taking that breath, checking in with yourself. Think of the emotion that your child might be feeling, and you might not have it spot on. If you're not sure, really just using the word upset, it really covers a lot of different emotions, and then use the emotion in a sentence. So for an older kid, it might be like, it sounds like you're really disappointed with all of these new rules. You want to play with your friends right now, or just you're upset, or something upset you, or you seem sad, something happened. So just giving them some words, and then giving them some space to just let it out, ring their sponge, and you're there with them, and you're sitting with them, and you're kind of nodding, you're looking and acknowledging, and showing that you're not rattled by their big feelings, and that you can handle it, and that you're a safe space, is really a really simple but difficult thing to do. So that's kind of the how-to. Did you have anything to add on that, Megan?
Yeah, I mean, I think often we add in, I hear people say, or, we've all done it ourselves, is you might say the first part of that, it sounds like you're disappointed about these new rules, but blah, 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 like a lot of still rationalizing and kind of taking it more heady, instead of more heart, that connection. Sometimes it can just be that, and then kind of see what kind of response you get there. Like we're trying to make it right. That's not often what people need. And I'm sure everybody can think about times with their own friends or with their family members, whoever they're closest with. And they do share that vulnerability, and they're just really sad about it. And they just want to be sad or just upset or frustrated in that moment. And they don't want somebody to fix it for them. I'm sure many people with their own spouses can think of many examples where you're just like, I just need to be upset right now. And I need to feel that. And I need to not be alone with that. And then when somebody says, that must be hard, you're like, yes, it's hard. And that's all you need. And then maybe, and then another comment, if your child is ready to kind of engage with that, is saying, are you looking for some solutions, right? Are you looking for some ideas for some solutions right now, or not right now? I mean, kind of giving that choice of, do you want me to give input or not? And sometimes they might be ready for that, and other times they may not be. So, and accepting either answer, and that can really work too. Allie, I don't think we're going to have time for that other section on some of the next part we were going to talk about. I do want to have a time, like kind of have people chime in. Is there anything you want to kind of quickly add about this?
No, these are just for the little ones, or, I mean, when words won't work, just kind of write things down. So if kids are upset about all of the things they're missing out, if you can just kind of have a master list of like, oh, I really miss going to the movie theater and getting popcorn, like, let's write it on our list of like things we're going to do. And there's kind of this magical thing of when you write it down, it feels more powerful. So it feels more solution focused. So I think that might be, with all of the things that are coming up that they're missing out on or that they want to do, like, let's add it to our list. So it's an active process. We're drawing pictures for little ones, but we can skip that one.
And the other thing to kind of add is, I think I might have mentioned in the other session. So I'm the daughter of a psychologist myself, and my dad did do a lot of these things of, when frustrated about something, saying, you sound angry. And I would be like, of course I'm angry. And I remember feeling annoyed in the moment when that response came. But at the same time, I remember it now, and that I do remember it being helpful, even though in the moment it didn't look like I was. So,
yeah, less is often more. So when your kids are upset, when your spouse is upset, when your coworker's upset, sometimes just kind of like, yeah, oh, yeah, like getting good with the sounds versus sentences.
Or especially with the tattling. That's a whole nother section, but like, oh, the shit up myself. Oh, that's hard. Yeah. And you don't have to solve it for them. So this is something I think we're going to have to kind of come back to another time, more about like routines and other ways to kind of get kids to do the things. But I feel like that's almost like a whole separate topic. So I don't think we have time for that right now. But we just kind of wanted to add in terms of a final word, and then have a chance for any kind of comments or questions. Obviously, these are unusual times. We are feeling all of the feelings, and one of the slides we had before said, emotion needs motion. So kind of when we get stuck with those feelings, that's when some negative outcomes can come. And that's why we talked a lot about naming emotions. And it sounds potentially, I don't know, some might hokey or something, but whether it's with our own selves or with other people, using those emotion words has, there's just a lot of research out there that shows what kind of value that has. So obviously we're all feeling tired and nervous, and we're adjusting and we're grieving and we're juggling all of these things. And it's just really about giving ourselves grace. So, and if it doesn't any of these strategies that you want to try out, you might pick one with one child or one situation and try it out, see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, then get up and try it again. They're going to give us more opportunities to practice. So we have another quote from Glennon Doyle. And if you don't know who she is, she's another excellent person to kind of learn about or read about. She wrote several books. And the quote is, keep going. That's all you ever have to do, ever. You don't have to be amazing or fierce or beautiful or successful or good. Just keep going, please. Slowly is fine. Crawling is fine. No feeling is final except hope. So the idea of just do the next right thing and you don't have to have all the answers. And that's the whole giving yourself grace.
And we are human and we are not perfect parents by no stretch of the imagination.
And nobody knows how to pandemic. So
yeah, so when we lose our cool or we say things we wish we hadn't in a tone that was harsher than we anticipated, then look at it as a great opportunity to model to your children how to make amends. Like, I'm sorry I lost my cool. I spoke more harshly than I wish I would have in the moment. So even the opportunities where we are not our perfect selves are opportunities for us to model things to our kids. So don't get too down on yourself when you get stressed or overwhelmed and you kind of like lose it in a way you wish you wouldn't have. If you feel like this is just our practice so that you guys have the information, we spoke last time, a lot of therapeutic practices that are going to telehealth where you're doing this sort of thing with psychologists or social workers or counselors. This is our practice. If you feel like you need additional resources at home, we do consultation with parents, we work with kids.
And insurance usually covers this. And I would say our practice does, and many other practices, but not all, do it where, you pay and then you can seek for reimbursement. But there's often a lot of opportunity for reimbursement, including for telehealth, especially now, because it's the only way that clients are able to be seen. So, and it doesn't have to be a long-term thing. So just something for you or anybody else to think about. Let's see, we are probably already at 5. Oh my gosh, we're past. So does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Or did anything come up, Sarah, that you'd want to add in?
Not yet, but if anybody wants to comment to me or unmute yourself and make a comment, feel free. Now is the time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I just had a quick question. I have 3 kids under 5, including a newborn. So this has definitely been stressful and have anxiety myself. But my son, who is almost 5, definitely has anxiety. And we've had kind of issues with it over the past year. And he's developed in the past week anxious habit that I'm not sure if we should just like ignore it or trying to get him to acknowledge it. I don't like in times of transition, like when we start a new school year, in our routine changes, this tends to happen. Mm-hmm. And he was doing so great this school year, and he hasn't had one in like a couple months. And then in the past week, like right now, he is going to the bathroom like every 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And to the point where last week I actually was like, maybe it is more of like a UTI. And I called the pediatrician, obviously didn't want to take him in. And they were like, at nighttime, it doesn't happen. So it doesn't sound like that's it. But I don't know if we should be addressing it or just kind of trying to ignore what's happening. Because he seems like when we draw attention to it, then it almost seems like he does it more to get our attention.
I don't know if necessarily paying attention to the behavior is what's needed, but potentially on the uncertainty. Okay. My guess is that's what this behavior, and that's one thing I wanted to add in terms of like getting some additional assistance for anybody, not necessarily mentioning this to you specifically, but when there's those, more consistent, everybody's going to have different kind of emotions day to day, but when it's, interfering or it's not improving or it's maladaptive, like those are times to potentially explore more services. But I think maybe establishing like more ways that to create more certainty. And not on top of all of this happening, there's also a newborn. That's right. A lot, yeah, that is a lot of change, but kind of what is the same and maybe like there's maybe some things like special time, and I'm sure you're obviously everyone's spending so much time with their families, but like something special, you know, with just you or just, you know, his father, like spending and thinking of those routines that he can like look forward to. I don't know if you necessarily need to put a lot of attention into the bathroom part.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anything else come through to share?
One person asked the name of the podcast about mindfulness, and I told them and everybody we're going to post all the recording as well as all of the you know what I'm trying to say, the thing that they have on the screen. And so if you guys want to kind of like have resources that we reference, brilliant. So all the links will be in there, and if there's anything that you guys referenced, if you'll kind of just post it in the comments of the information that you post, that'd be great.
I do have another one to add that we didn't mention here for the, was it Jen, the question you just had? The book, The Opposite of Worry. That one, it's in a podcast form or in audiobook form, which might work for you while you're feeding your baby. That's another good one to kind of just explore like an understanding anxiety in children.
And then there's another little workbook, I think, depending on the development of the 5-year-old, there's a book called, it's a little workbook called What to Do. Is it What to Do When You Worry Too Much?
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's on Amazon. It's a cute little workbook that talks about how to handle worries and what we water with our attention and our time. Yeah, so anyways. Anything else?
Okay. If there was any specific like further topics that people are kind of thinking about or that you wish we had covered or wish we could or hopeful that we could cover in the future, we're definitely open to suggestions. So if you have those and you want to chime in or share those in the chat, we'd be happy to take those into account. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful day. Hopefully you get to go outside and enjoy some more.
People say thank you. We enjoyed it. Very helpful. And yeah, and I want to reiterate, if in the event on Facebook, if you guys have any comments or questions as far as like things that you want to have covered in the future, please go ahead and comment in there. That we'll be checking that as well, and we'll put the information there. So thank you everybody so much for joining us. And I think that if there's no more questions, then we will be done. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and weekend.
Take care of yourselves. Enjoy some time away from the news and from all the stress.
Lots of thank yous.
Thank you, everyone.
Yay. Yeah. Thanks for doing this. Just reading their comments as they go. In a minute, I'll stop recording so that we can do that. I gotta figure out how to do that. Alrighty then. I just removed the last person. Here we go. And how do I stop recording this? There it is. And